Welcome to the No Script Show, where I, Whiskey Wotan, as you all know, have betrayed everyone in a 4D chess move to bring back my good friend Quinton. Quinton, welcome to this edition of the No Script Show.
Thank you so much for having me, my brother. It's good to be back and good to be talking to you as well.
Yeah, man. So let's get right into it, as the YouTubers say. What's happening on your end? I'm sure you have some interesting insights post Brexit and actually living there. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, what I've noticed, which is really great from the Dutch perspective, is so the Dutch basically invented capitalism. So they are going to profit from chaos no matter what.
Right.
And they've really set themselves up very well to profit from Brexit. So I've been here just over 3 years now.
Right.
The south of Amsterdam, which is very easily connected to Schiphol Airport, 30 minutes by train, has become this central business hub with massive skyscrapers and really beautiful infrastructure, particularly also because the Dutch corporate tax is so low. So they're attracting a whole bunch of businesses who are going to move their European headquarters to the Netherlands.
Right.
So I don't think it's all doom and gloom from where I'm sitting, but things remain to be seen how the Conservatives in the UK use this opportunity to legislate their way into a freer market, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dutch are going to benefit either way.
Okay. I will say from my perspective on the whole Brexit thing, it was kind of like a cat not wanting to leave the damn room. You like open the door and it's like, are you going to get in or out? Like, it's just, I know a lot of my friends in the research community, like it's interesting. The people that I know that are sort of in sort of research and development and science, sort of chemical engineering sciences and all that kind of stuff, they were very opposed to Brexit from day one. And the people that I know that come from sort of worksman, tradesman backgrounds, you know, bricklayers, construction workers, welders, all that kind of stuff, they were very pro-Brexit. And the other split I noticed was it's obviously the younger generation. The younger generation are anti-Brexit, and the older generation are very pro-Brexit. So it's an interesting split to me.
Yeah, there's also the geographical split as well. London itself sees itself not as an English city; it's an international city, and so most Londoners are pro-Remain, I would say. And then if you go into maybe the northern former industrial parts of England, and it's actually funny. There was a tweet that went viral. The guy was joking. He was waiting in a line at Schiphol Airport, and he was saying, "Yes, this isn't the Brexit I voted for. 55 minutes in the line." And everyone jumps on, and it's like, "Yeah, this is the Brexit you voted for, you idiot! Haha!" Now you get to see what it's all about, which shows me that number one, yes, most of the English people really cared about was their holidays in it.
Holidays in it.
But Schiphol replied to that, because one thing about the Dutch is they will never let you talk bad about them. They will say something back. So Schiphol clapped back and was like, "Yeah, look, nothing has changed in Schiphol for English people. It was only that we were training new staff yesterday, and that caused a bit of a delay. So never mind, but the tweet has taken on a life of its own." But, you know, that just goes to show people will see what they want to see.
Yeah, it's a real interesting sort of Rorschach test. Like, do you take this tweet seriously in any way or form? And actually, let me backtrack for a second. The other split I noticed in terms of older and younger is also across the pond, as they say in the US. The younger people are very pro sort of Bernie Sanders socialism, and the older generation, even amongst the Democrat voters, are more of the moderates. So like your Amy Klobuchars, your Joe Bidens, and all that. And I think it's interesting that the younger generations in both the UK and the US are pro, socialism, centralized governments, very big centralized government and top-down sort of control. And the older generation are not for that. And I think it's ironic because, I mean, it's in living memory that we actually fought a pretty catastrophic war against a sort of centralized super state headed by Germany. So it's so I think the reason the younger generation are pro that as that sort of stuff is because then they're too young to remember. As in the US also, they're too young to remember what socialism is really all about. And it's kind of sad to me that they've sort of lost that connection. I'm not like a full-on ANCAP by any stretch of the imagination, so I can see why socialism to the untrained ear would sound very lovely, but in practice it's not so great. It really isn't.
No, a funny thing, I had a professor at university who used to always say, like, if you're not a socialist when you're young, you have no heart, but if you're still a socialist when you're older, you have no brain.
Yes, I've heard that saying as well.
Ironically, he was like really pushing Marxism onto me.
No.
About, like, that's how it is in the universities, man. I mean, I did not come across a single person who wasn't willing to accept the premise of Marxism. In fact, like, I came out of university as a Marxist. I've spoken about this a bit before, but you can't come out of the humanities department in most universities without being a Marxist. And the thing was that I didn't get a political education at home. My parents weren't political at all.
Right.
In fact, we never talked about politics, philosophy, anything like that.
Right.
So the people who I engaged with on these subjects were professors and my fellow students. And of course, we know the universities are hotbeds of revolutionary ideology.
Right.
Because they need to stay proximal to the state in order to derive their power. So I mean, I came out as a true believer, and it was only when I started working and actually saw, when I was sort of guest lecturing at Wits, when I saw Fees Must Fall destroying shit, that I was like, oh.
Wait a second.
Fruits of the seed.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because for my part, to parallel that with my upbringing, obviously, I mean, I would be considered by a lot of my friends now to be of the hard right. I don't think I am by any stretch of the imagination. But I think I very obviously I'm quite libertarian, but lean right, so bottom right quadrant, and on the old, classic political compass map. And I think part of that, a lot of that, like what you mentioned with your upbringing not having like much political discussion, my upbringing was I come from a more traditional, as they say in the US, WASP family, except not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Yeah. I mean, we had, Sunday, we still have Sunday dinners, or lunches, and, we go to mom's house and sit around the table and say grace and that sort of thing. So I think obviously that sort of upbringing had already and also my grandfather was quite a businessman. So I think to a certain extent that sort of upbringing, even though when I was younger I was much more to the left, sort of helped inoculate me against going a certain direction.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I like how you brought out the family values and especially the religious aspect of it, because I was also raised in a very family orientated and very religious Catholic house. And also my father was a businessman as well, an entrepreneur. So that's a code in the Portuguese community for he had a shop. So
of course.
Yeah. So I think as I got older and when I saw the chaos that came from revolutionary ideology and I looked at what I actually valued, it was much more in line with those family values, those moral values. And even though I'm not a religious person.
Right.
I'm researching more now. I'm reading Tom Holland's book Dominion. It's really good. I'm researching about how the foundations of the ideas that I hold most dear are Christian ideas.
Right. Yeah.
When you're like, I was a young edgy atheist, but now I see how utterly wrong I was to dismiss all of that wealth of knowledge, because it really is so fundamental to who I am and to the ideas of the West, and especially liberal Western democracy.
Exactly. I mean, not to, and I'm glad you brought that values thing up. I know there's a lot of kids on the internet these days with like Pepe avatars and Greco-Roman busts who are like full-on traditionalists. I don't think they really understand the values, but they are right in that there is a certain, like what you say, like there's a certain undertone in sort of developed countries, the West, as we say, that is underpinned by what are Christian values. A lot, even our laws. You can sort of. I say you can sort of extrapolate most of. I've never read all the laws in South Africa, and I don't think anyone that's not a lawyer has. But just by sort of following the 10 Commandments in Christianity, you can kind of more or less gauge what all the laws are in most countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to segue into the same, segue not really out of this topic. One of the interesting things I came across in the book, there's so many, but the most recent one was the idea that marriage for love and monogamy is not, it's a revolutionary Christian idea.
Right.
Judeo-Christian maybe, but a Christian idea, because previously, yes, even in the Roman Empire, people married one woman, but marriages were not about
monogamy
or about companionship, and certainly not monogamy from the male point of view. I mean, the male had the right in law to force himself onto any slave he wanted to, basically. But Christianity really drove the point home that, hang on, a woman's body is actually a sacred thing, and the love between a man and woman is a sacred thing, and a monogamous marriage is a sacred thing. And of course, it took hundreds of years for this to develop, but that was the seed of this structure that we take for granted as people who practice monogamy. So I just thought, like, it really drove home the point that, man, I take so much for granted without knowing where it comes from.
Oh, yeah.
And when I do realize this, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that again, is the whole monogamy thing. I actually really enjoy mentioning to my friends, us being monogamous and marrying for love is a fairly recent human development. I remember the story of I can't remember which Roman senator it was, but he apparently in the streets kissed his wife on the lips and said he loved her, and some of his compatriots sort of mocked him, and they're like, he loves his wife? That's ridiculous. It's just
thing I've ever heard.
But that was real. That was real to them. That's the reality of how they lived.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it really now underpins everything that I think is good that we can hope to accomplish as human beings.
Yeah, and by good, I would say, and this is my take on it, what we can accomplish being good is living a good life. And when people ask me what is living a good life, I would say trying to live a wise life. And a wise life is to move in the direction of the best person you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I also like Jordan Peterson's take on this, because it's not just about you. Because you living a good life is, yes, being the best person for you, but it also echoes out into your home, your community, your society at large. And I guess that's why I consider myself now a bit more conservative, is that I've realized that that civilization is like a thin layer of ice on top of an ocean of chaos. Like
that is brilliant.
Has tamed our animal instincts, because let's face it, we are animals.
Oh yeah.
We have the need to fight and fuck.
That's
Civilization pains us.
yeah.
It's 101, really.
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling. It's another thing I keep telling my friends here is, you do realize we're here because we're the descendants of the ones that survived, ate the most, and fucked everything they could find. Like, that's who we're the descendants of.
Yeah.
And then they ate everything that didn't kill them. Oh yeah. I was actually having a discussion about this on my stoop with the old conscious character. I said,
shout out to the boy.
My man, I'm actually gonna.
How good was he on Man Patreon, man?
Oh, my dude! I just listened to that podcast yesterday. Shout out to Man Patreon. We're actually putting together a little collab podcast between the Man Patreon guys, Conscious Caracal, myself, and the No Script Show. So, if you want to hop in on that, bud, you're more than welcome.
I would really love to talk to them. They had such an interesting conversation.
Yeah, we're putting together a whole little podcast super group, as it were, super best friends, Justice League. So, yeah. But back to, with Conscious Character, we had this whole discussion on our stoop the other day, and it's, people don't realize how brutally unfair life was for the longest amount of time in civilization. You could have just hunted something, and some dude or two dudes with rocks and a spear come along, kill you, and take what you just ate, and you never get back to your tribe or whatever. We take for, even in the medieval ages, at nighttime, it just happens to be nighttime, and a raving band of whoever just comes, loots the village, burns it down, and rapes and kills. People really, really don't understand how brutally unfair life was.
Exactly, man, and this is why I think people need to be really cautious about revolutionary ideology, because it deconstructs that which stops us from descending into a nasty, brutish, and short existence. It doesn't leave us with anything. It takes up every little brick of civilization that we've built, and it says, all of this is oppression, break it down.
Right.
And then we'll end up hunting and killing each other again.
Yeah, it's really quite a, I wouldn't say haunting concern for me, but it is something that I think of quite often. We are this close to going down that path. We like to tell ourselves that we're so civilized it couldn't break down, but we are just so close all the time, every damn day. No matter how civilized we are now, I sort of go through these scenarios in my head for whatever reason every now and then, and I think, you know what, actually, no matter how civilized we are, within a year, humanity could just be brutish. It could all go down the drain. Utterly. Yeah. And that's... yeah.
It really is scary, man. I think about this all the time in meetings, actually. Because I mean, obviously meetings are like a pissing contest half the time. So
of course.
I sit there and I think, okay, this guy is chairing the meeting, but look at him. Would he survive in the wild? No. Would I take him? Yes. So, luckily we have this forum, because otherwise, the strong would take everyone else, and some super tall Dutch dude would probably take me out. After I take the small German guy out, and then we just land up back as the strong inherit everything.
Exactly.
Strong and violent inherit everything.
Yeah, so we went from the strong that and violent inherit everything to the Christian principle of the meek shall inherit the earth now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, did you ever see that Jordan Peterson quote about the meek shall inherit the earth?
Yes, I did. The one about those who know how to use their sword but keep sheath.
Yeah, and I only recently ran into that. I thought, fuck, that is such an interesting... what is your take on that? Because I think that's such an interesting insight on that. Or maybe let everyone know what the actual quote is. Yeah.
Well, it's very synchronistic that you bring that up, because I had this exact conversation with my wife this week. because we actually went to the same church unbeknownst to one another until we were quite grown up. But
that is insane, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we grew up in the same hometown, but I just never met her, before this. She was a few years younger than me. So, but anyway, our one mass I recall vividly was the mass where the priest was talking about what they call the Beatitudes. So that is this idea of the first shall be last and the last shall be first. The meek shall inherit the earth. But the interpretation that Jordan Peterson gave was that he who knows how to use his sword but keep it sheathed shall inherit the earth.
Exactly.
And to me, it means that you have to know and realize your capacity for power and for violence and for being a nasty brute. Harness that without doing harm to someone else.
Exactly.
And you shall inherit the earth.
Yeah, it's
powerful, man. I actually have goosebumps just thinking about it.
It's incredible. It actually also makes me think of the Spartans, because the Spartans, as so many people know, for those of you who don't know, the Spartans actually existed outside of the Zack Snyder 300 movie. 300 was actually based on the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Spartan king Leonidas actually had a royal guard of about 300 Spartans, but there were a couple of thousand other Greeks with him. But I mean, that doesn't make for good cinema, so whatevs. And the Spartans were this ancient sort of very warrior-like society. They, when babies were born, they were thrown out if they were perceived to have any defects. Their little sort of prepubescent boys would go out into the wild for training before they got their first pube type thing, and they had a deserved reputation in the ancient world of being incredible warriors, and they were. But what a lot of people don't know, in connection with the keeping your sword sheath thing, is that the Spartans actually, relative to during outside of certain hot periods where they had city-state wars and then the Persian Wars, for most of the time, the Spartans, despite having such an incredible army, didn't actually like taking their army out to fight that often. And that's partially because they knew that even if you're amazing, there's still a chance you can lose. And if you have that amazing capacity for violence and brutishness, and you use it all the time, you're gonna come out last eventually. You're just gonna be ground down, and you're gonna be destroyed.
Yeah, there's always a bigger fish, man.
Exactly. It's just it's something that people who have little understanding of violence tend to forget, that there's always a bigger fish. There's always somebody bigger and tougher than you. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, and I also guess this goes into a fundamental difference I see between conservatives or even classical liberals and liberals with a capital L and leftists. So I'm going to group a whole bunch of people in together.
Okay.
Say leftists, those who believe in social engineering.
Right.
I think they don't understand the dark side of humanity. Because if they did, they would be very cautious about unleashing it. When I watch what happens at the State of the Nation address, to me that is, the EFF's constant disruption, warlike rhetoric. They are so close to unleashing the dark side of human nature, but it's because they don't understand and appreciate its consequences. And it's a scary thought to me.
Wow, yeah.
They believe human beings can just be engineered into being good, and once we've destroyed oppression, everyone will be good, and everyone will be on the same level. Everyone will sing Kumbaya.
And that's so unreal. I mean, that's sort of when a lot of, as you say, leftists, and they're generally pretty, not just irreligious or non-religious, they're openly hostile towards sort of older religions, and they're like, it's oppressive and all that. And what they what for me they don't understand about some of the oppressiveness of little corona there, the oppressiveness of the rules of living a good life that some religions dictate to you. Some of those rules are there because, to me, at least with the sort of Abrahamic religions, there's an underpinning that, as you say, human beings are essentially fallen, nasty creatures. We have that in us inherently. And if you think that you are now, after who knows how many years and how many attempts for thousands of years, you're the special one with this ideology that's going to now change what is inherently in our nature, I doubt that. I really doubt you can. Nothing's impossible, but I really doubt. I think we've tried enough times, and we know that we are essentially fallen, nasty creatures that need to have certain things and behave a certain way. Otherwise, all hell's going to break loose. I don't think we can train that out of us. The best we can do is, as you say, this sort of thin ice on this ocean of chaos. This is pretty much the best we can do in most cases.
Yeah, and I think this ties into what Caracal was talking about yesterday the day before on Manpatria, the idea of culture, and culture is the repository of those things which keep our animalistic nature at bay. And
yes,
as I said earlier, Christianity has played a big part in this. Judeo-Christian values in the West and places where the light has shone. It is a repository of those aspects which help to keep us away from killing each other, raping each other, and basically doing what animals do. And I really just wish people understood how fragile that was. That's really the thing that terrifies me the most is how fragile all of that is.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see how fragile it is as we sit here speaking on our phones. That's the other thing. It's just, in a way, we've become almost too successful. We've become so successful and comfortable for so long that's part of why I think a lot of this leftist ideology is flourishing again, is that they've become... They're in countries where you're so successful and comfortable for so long, you can't see that part of humanity anymore. You can't envision it anymore because you're just so removed from it for so long. You can't encapsulate it in your mind. It's just, it's not there for you. Well, I run up against this a lot talking to Europeans. I mean, the naivete is astounding sometimes. And I also think that this is also why some people have this... so it's a paradoxical reaction. So they're very naive about violence and human nature because they don't encounter it a lot. And I think a lot of people believe they don't encounter it because they have functioning democratic governments. And yes, of course, that plays a role. The government's role is to use force to enforce, people's rights.
Yeah.
And keep one person, responsible for harming another person. The government steps in. That was a key development in our civilization. But then other people go, well, maybe we need like the EU, another level of government to stop us from warring with each other. Because a lot of people do believe this. Like, the EU is there to stop European countries from descending into World War II. Actually, when you think about it, there are emergent ways of doing the same thing, like trading, for instance. You would go and destroy your key trading partner because then your country would have no economy. So, I also think that this naivete plays out in also a wish for big government.
Well, there's that old saying.
Emergent phenomenon.
Yeah, the emergent, that saying, like, when goods don't cross borders, soldiers do. And as you say, you're not going to destroy your key trading partner. I actually, now this pops up for me. I believe it or not, gang, between all my whiskey wordstanding and drinking, I actually have time to listen to some very interesting history podcasts. And my most recent completion is one by Dan Carlin called Hardcore History, and he's got this incredibly long, and it still doesn't cover everything, sort of pathway about the First World War and how it all went down and what was happening. And with regard to what you're talking about, the naivete of the Europeans, like, these are the descendants of the same people who fought the First World War. And I mean, obviously, even I wouldn't get too brutal about this, but if you guys give it a listen, you read the excerpts of some of these soldiers, and it's almost inconceivable. Like, us today, I don't think even the most hardened sort of Delta Force soldier could psychologically handle the First World War. You know, there's a couple of bad battles in history, like, you know, where some of the war with the Punic Wars with the Romans and Carthage, and they had bad days where it was absolutely slaughtering. Like, there's one where the Carthaginians surrounded a large Roman detachment, and they slaughtered them for an entire afternoon. Imagine that, you and like 800 of your buddies surrounded, and all you can do is wait for your turn to be slaughtered because they're just massing. It's incredible, but even that is not as bad as the First World War, because the thing is, you can name the worst battle in antiquity, you can name the worst battle in the Vietnam War, you can name the Saving Private Ryan, Normandy, D-Day landings. That was a normal, nice afternoon during the First World War. These people were fighting. I mean, imagine, like, especially at places like the Somme, Verdun, Ypres, Passchendaele, as they call it, and that's just the Western Front. You have, aside from the trenches, you have shell holes, and you're living side by side, shells falling all the time, shell shock, and you're living with people who get horrific injuries, and there's mud and rats and lice and gas, and there's sometimes sludge. And this sludge is made from a mixture of gas, pollen, dead soldiers, and their bodies decaying into the sludge. You're living in that every day. Can you imagine anyone in Europe now being able to fight that war? I don't know. Maybe you should give it a listen. But like, the psychology of some of these guys, that their diary entries, these were 14, in some cases 14 or 15-year-old children fighting this war. Yeah, man. There's a couple of Nazi bunkers around here in The Hague because they built a seawall
right
over here, and so like they only open them up for a few weeks a year. But you know, I like that there are reminders of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Berlin is particularly full of those kind of things. An amazing city if you're interested in history and looking at the dark side of human nature. You can be in a place with amazing infrastructure that's super peaceful, super free. I mean, my first memory of Berlin is literally walking into Tiergarten, which is this huge park in the middle of the city, and it was maybe 12 degrees, and people are lying naked in the sun, and that's chill, that's normal. You're allowed to do that because it's Berlin. And then you can go into a literal bunker, a literal Nazi bunker, and go through a museum of all the atrocities committed by Hitler and the Third Reich. And that juxtaposition of what we are capable of on both sides, it's really a wonderful experience for a person to have. And if that doesn't make you
I think
revolutionary ideology, then I don't think it will.
I think I'm going to have to visit that then. I mean, also from my side, a similar juxtaposition. As again, this podcast, there's a journal sample from one of the soldiers. He talks about, we were standing there, and a couple of miles off, I think a 6-pounder shell hit a clump of some of my buddies. We scooped together the remains of 3 of them. That's all we could find. We put them in a bag, the goop and the bones and the guts. And that's insane. I mean, he just had to go on. But at the same time, at the precise same time, just 30 miles back from the Western Front, generals on both sides were sitting in gigantic French chateaus,
sipping wine and saying, okay, move this division here. And like, it sort of reminds me of what you said with the Nazi bunker juxtapositions. Like, while they are doing this horrific thing and sending lambs to the slaughter, there are generals sitting in these palatial French and these palatial sort of continental European chateaus, sipping wine and having veal or whatever. Like, if that doesn't describe the insanity of how sort of juxtapositioned humanity can be, it's So speaking of actual Nazis, let's chat about, because apparently, as you know, the left in America has lost its ever-loving mind.
So entertaining. Every day is a new joy.
It is a new joy. I mean, I enjoy our philosophical chats, but I guess I'm sort of obligated at this point with the No Script brand to cover a bit of US politics. And boy, oh no, it seems Bernard McSanders, who has been basically 85 million years old all his life, is going to be the nominee for the Democrats. An actual, honest to God, like, red, like he holidayed in the Soviet Union. He's never denounced any, and I do mean any, of his ideologies of no matter what happened in the Soviet Union or Venezuela. He just moves it to a different country. He's like, oh no, I do not mean Cuba. I mean like Sweden. That is the kind of socialism I want. So it seems Bernard McSanders is going to be the Democratic nominee, and that scares the ever-living hell out of me. All the Democrats had to do was not be crazy. That's all they had to do. And they could have had a fighting chance. They could have ran with a moderate like old Joe Biden. Like, I think the only moderates they have left is probably Amy Klobuchar and Tulsi Gabbard, who's an actual war veteran. Like, I'd be like, actual war veteran, run her. Do you know how many people just to the right of center would cross the aisle and vote for Tulsi Gabbard or Amy Klobuchar from like Minnesota?
Team Tulsi, man. Or I'm Team Tulsi all the way.
As far as the Democrats are concerned, my favorites were sadly Yang is out, but Yang and Gabbard were my favorites. Failing in that, I'd say Amy Klobuchar. The rest of them are a burning heap of crap, and I think that if it comes down to a Trump Bernard Sanders fight slug out, it's going to be much of a repeat of Boris Johnson versus Jeremy Corbyn. I think it'll sort of mirror that. That's my guess.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think, 100%. I don't think Bernie could flip any Trump voters to the Democrats.
Not a chance.
Who I think could have done so is Tulsi, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because she's also got that non-interventionist mindset.
Yeah, and distinguished service record.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think a lot of people who voted Trump, who may be on the fence, would have voted for Trump because of his perceived focus on isolationism, at least in terms of military intervention.
Yeah.
So I would go for Tulsi. And another thing about Tulsi that's so great is, if you need to lift a country on your shoulders, you need to have strong glutes.
Tulsi does have a lot of people thirsty. I'm not gonna lie. I've seen some workout vids of hers. I am a thirsty libertarian boy for Tulsi. I'll openly admit that. It's just So.
But you know what's also odd about the whole situation with Tulsi is that she ticks a lot of boxes that the intersectional left would have completely lost their minds over.
Yes.
Here you have a woman of color, so I think she's Polynesian.
Yes.
A woman, yes. And actually, very, very well spoken, sensible policies, very moderate.
Yeah.
But now she's all of a sudden a Russian asset or something, according to Hillary. But
Hillary.
It shows they don't care about winning. They don't care about winning.
I suspect, here's my thing. There is, and this is my tinfoil hat thing. There is a cabal within the Democratic establishment who are like, you know what, fuck it. Trump's probably, very rare is it in history that you get a one-term president in the United States. So they're like data suggests the American people do not switch horses halfway through the race. So he's going to likely get 2 terms. So I think some strategists in the Democrats, and this is my theory, at least this is what I tell myself to stay sane, is that they're intentionally putting up absolute garbage heaps for this one, and they're going to lose. And then also the garbage heaps that they're putting up are approximately 65 million years old. So they put up these garbage heaps, the garbage heaps lose, and they're like, oh, well, we tried, and they die off before the next round. And then the younger, more moderate people, like, as you say, a Tulsi Gabbard or even an Andrew Yang, those are the people that the real strategists are actually going to push the next time around. Or at least that's what I tell myself to justify the fact that an actual socialist geriatric is looking like the leading option for the Democrats. Like, it's just wow. I don't know what to say anymore. It's
very weird, man. But Bernie is super popular here in Europe. A lot of people are into his kind of stuff. One thing I also think that socialism has done well is PR, because here in Europe, they take the welfare state for granted. Most countries have some level of social welfare, be it in terms of healthcare. Holland doesn't have socialized healthcare, which is, I think good in a way, but in another way we have problems with the healthcare system. But I just think it's the mentality of the doctors here. But, we take this, Europeans, we take this as for granted, a level of social welfare. But to socialists, they claim that. They claim, but that's a socialist thing. But actually, if you were to really ask a Danish person who knows what's going on, they would say, we don't have socialism. We have a very strong market economy with high taxes, which are used for socialism. It's not the same thing. And
yes.
The devil's in the details. And that's where a lot of people, that like Bernie think, but he's just going to give the US what we have in Europe, socialized healthcare. And I just keep going, guys, you don't know socialism.
That's precisely it. I mean, it's, as you say, it's an incredibly powerful market engine with a efficient sort of redistributionist body on top of it. That's it. But the engine that drives it is still a market engine.
Absolutely, and the government is not administering the healthcare in many cases. It's just funding it. So I actually don't mind that. I mean, I start from the point of view that taxation is theft.
Of course. Hashtag there.
I'm okay with some taxation if it's used to fund something that is not run by the government. I know that creates additional problems, but on that sort of thing, I'm like, okay, if you want to use my, let's say €200 a month, I can pay it to a collective bargaining council for healthcare.
Yeah.
And they can say, okay, well, everyone's paying this every month, and then hospitals can compete and say, okay, well, we're going to open a hospital here, and that person gets sick. It comes out of the collective bargaining agreement, and I'm okay with that kind of thing.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you as well. I'm pretty libertarian in taxation and stuff, but I tend to agree with you that at least that, like, let it do that bit of good at the very least. It's just, it's
otherwise I don't see a point of it at all.
It's actually the only possible good I see coming out of that. It's the only good I can see coming out of it. So fuck. Yeah. What a world. What a damn world. On the upside though, I don't know if you well, I guess not that much in the tech sphere, but I always look forward to chatting to you about tech because for me, I think of a technological advancement in, as you know, the details, the mathematics, the nuts and bolts of it, right? But the reason I enjoy talking tech to you and Conscious Caracal is that through exchange with you, I can see the societal implications of that tech. And one of the techs I'm actually looking forward to talking to you about is the field of sort of self-repairing or self-healing code, which is basically what it sounds like. It's a program that fixes its own bugs, basically, or fixes the bugs in other programs. And the aim of this is because what a lot of people don't understand about software development is that a lot of the pricing comes in on things like man hours, bug fixing, and all that sort of stuff. Writing it is actually pretty easy. I know, I've been doing it for years and years and years. Writing it is dead easy. It's actually getting it to work and maintain it. That's the insane part. So what I wanted to actually discuss with you is with this advent, ironically, jobs like lawyers, accountants, and even software engineers are going to become increasingly automated away. And what I think the jobs that will actually be safe, more safe, are things like plumbers and electricians, because a program that fixes itself still can't lean underneath the cupboard and look at your pipes or inspect your wiring. So I don't know. What do you perceive that for sort of societies as we start moving in that direction?
Well, yeah, I do think that a lot of people will be made redundant. Like, I think if you're, and I hate to say this because I don't know if as a psychologist I would be immune to this, but anyway, at the moment I'm working sort of in tech adjacent to sort of keeping programs running but without programming them. So I would also lose that job, and psychology might be into the dustbin as well. But if you're a radiologist, you don't have 20 years of a radiology career, because they will be using artificial intelligence to replace you.
I actually saw that. I saw that like 3 years ago. People were working on AI that starts inspecting X-rays for like lung cancer type thing.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of jobs that are what we would consider, like for well-educated and well-paid people are going to disappear essentially, and the things which are lindy, which have stood the test of time, like plumbers, bricklayers, and all of that, that will become the new high-paid work. I mean, although to be honest, so I work at the European Space Agency, and
nice.
I mean, and so I work. I collaborate with ESA and NASA collaborate a lot, and I have access to a lot of their classified documentation. So I can see that there is a systemic resistance in these big organizations towards this artificial intelligence, smarter software sort of way of doing things. And the reason why there is such institutional resistance to this is because that's how these people in these well-paid organizations keep their jobs. But once the AI starts doing it a lot better and quicker, it will start in the private sector, and I think government sectors will have a few years left before it starts to come after them, and then mass joblessness, and then don't know what next.
Yeah, where do you find? I mean, one of my favorite science podcasts is Isaac Arthur. I listened to a lot of his stuff, and he was actually discussing this, because it's not just the AI that we're advancing. Our circuitry, our chemical engineering, and all that is getting better, and our genetic engineering is getting better. So he describes a situation whereby basically we could easily get to a point in life where essentially everyone is Batman, because you could have implants in your brain that give you this is sort of like with Musk's Neuralink thing. You can have an implant in your brain that gives you an inconceivable amount of collective knowledge and sort of trains you already how to do certain physical tasks forget 10 years at university or whatever, it's already implanted in you. And thanks to great genetic engineering, you could go out on an absolute bender or one night and then the next morning run a marathon or a sprint that would absolutely blow out the water the feats of some of our greatest athletes now. And again, it gets to the point of what I'm saying is, what do we do then? Like, how does humanity, and it's weird for me to say this because, if this is my job, I'm one of the people researching and making this, but I will say, and I've said this with Conscious Cackle as well, even people like me, we look at the implications in terms of genetic engineering and life extension and all that and automation, and we think, how far is too far? And that's a very difficult question to answer. Should we unlock this? Like, if we could engineer ourselves to live 3,000 years easily, should we? And I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, if somebody offered me the chance now to live 3,000 years, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I get it. I mean, essentially, all medicine is life extension, because we used to die at age 18 from a tooth abscess in ancient Egypt, So I get it, but we have to draw the line somewhere. I mean, maybe 150 years, cool. 200 good years, high quality years, but 3,000 years, I start to question, should we go down that path?
Yeah.
This
is a super scary subject, man, because when it comes to technology and humanity, the genie's out the bottle.
Yeah, that's I've said that to so many people, guys. I mean, yeah, we can put some effort into sort of AI kill switches or whatever, but in terms of stopping the tap, it's too late. We've already passed that Rubicon. The only thing we can do now, the best scenario, is guide it down the best outcome. But yeah, sorry, continue.
Well, yeah, last year I read this book by this famous anthropologist, Gregory Bateson. So he's a pioneer of systems theory. So, interesting dude. He was hired by the US military and helped to develop sort of guided missiles. And the secret to guided missiles was, cybernetics, right?
Yes.
So just getting information flow in the system correct is the secret to guided missiles, to simplify it, right? Am I theoretically at least on point with that?
Yeah. You're in the right neighborhood.
So, anyway, he looked at the relationship between population growth, the state of the environment, and technology. So what technology has enabled us to do is to sustain a higher population.
Yes.
Obviously, the more technology we develop, the more we extract from the earth. And okay, one could argue that we can develop technology to make it more sustainable. Fine, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you've essentially created a self-perpetuating cycle where you need to keep advancing technologically to sustain such a high population, and you need to keep extracting minerals, whatever, to create the energy to do this. And the more we rely on technology, the more we need to extract, the more we will grow. The more we grow, the more we rely on technology.
Yep.
So this is essentially an interminable cycle unless something happens. If technology breaks down, population will break down as well. You reset down to zero. And this is where the real concern comes from in terms of this. Like, we are going to outsource so many of our vital tasks to machines. If the machines fail us, there will be no human alive that could do those kind of things. And it will lead us to a mass starvation. And so I think we're not going to become stronger. We will become stronger to a point, and then when we reach that point, we will actually become super fragile because we've built up so many risks into our system. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah, and it actually gets. I know it's a bit of a doom and gloom thing. It's actually reminds me of. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the in terms of what you're talking about, the same cycle of needing to extract more is I can't remember what its name is. Something like fossil fuel extraction technology paradigm or paradox. Sorry, is basically if, as you say, like let's let's create a scenario whereby we get wiped out, or technology fails and we get wiped out, all of humanity. And let's say it's the turn of the intelligent octopi or the dolphins to take over. Whoever or whatever comes next after us is basically screwed, because we have extracted so much fossil fuel. And this is not me going full environmentalist, by the way, gang. But we've basically, I'm obviously not a geologist, but from what I understand from the tech sort of journals that I've read, we've reached a point where we've extracted so much fossil fuel beyond its sort of rate of replacement. And again, fossil fuels are still actually quite useful for a lot of people. But the problem is we've reached a point whereby whoever comes after us, if we're wiped out, they're screwed, because they need our level of technology to get to those fossil fuels. But you need fossil fuels to get to our level of technology, because we've extracted them so deeply. I mean, you can sort of think of it as initially you could use your spade to dig up some coal, whereas now you need full-on drilling rigs to get down to the coal several kilometers down. And you need fossil fuels to build those drilling rigs. But if you come after us, you don't have the fossil fuels to build those drilling rigs. So it's a interesting technological paradox.
Yeah, man, and I actually think this helps us come full circle to what we were talking about earlier, about the fragility of society and civilization. Technology is another level to this whole fragility. So it has helped also to calm the inner beast of humankind to have such technological advancement. But it is also, it's resting on a very tenuous thread.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you now from a technological standpoint, it actually wouldn't be that hard to EMP planet Earth back into the Stone Age. It's not difficult. And for example, your average fighter jet. Okay, this is a slight. Okay, like you said, we're on a tenuous thread, and we've actually quite fragile behind it, because your average fighter pilot in the First World War, or yes, there were planes then, or Second World War, was actually in many ways a better pilot than current modern military pilots, because they had to do a lot of shit for themselves. So. Modern fighter jets, okay, this is a slight tech derailment, are what we call aerodynamically unstable. And that means that if you take, let's say, I think the last aerodynamically stable plane that the US fielded or still fields is the F-15 Eagle. Shout outs to my man, non-linear nerds on the NoScript Discord. We're aviation geeks, and it's a perfect record plane. And aerodynamically stable means if you take an F-15 and you fly it and you kill the engines, okay, much like a commercial jetliner, it'll sort of coast and glide, right? If you take, let's say, an F-22 or an F-16 or F-117 Nighthawk stealth bomber, if you do the same thing with that, it's going to drop out of the sky like a stone. And it's actually physically impossible for anyone, or almost impossible for anyone, to fly one of these planes without the onboard computer that is literally doing millions of micro adjustments to the plane's fuel levels and ailerons and all that per second. I mean, you're still mostly in control, but what most people don't realize is that the onboard computer of those planes is doing millions of calculations to adjust just ever so slightly to keep the plane stable when you're holding the stick stable. And a lot of people will think, well, that's just stupid. Why would you build an aerodynamically unstable plane? And the reason is actually, although counterintuitive, quite simple. And it comes down to, if you want an air dominance fighter, you want it to be aerodynamically unstable because it enables it to do incredible feats in the air. It makes it incredibly agile and great at dodging and pulling all sorts of high G moves because it's aerodynamically unstable. That'll fall out the sky like a stone. So that comes back to the whole, we're a little weaker. Modern pilots might actually be a little worse off than their predecessors. So, yeah.
Yeah, the margins are very thin.
I will take.
from this conversation is that the margins are thin.
They're so thin, and it's hammering the point we've been talking so far is, guys, always remember we are this close. We're on a tiny sheet of ice on this ocean of chaos, and it's very comforting to think of that as you go to bed.
Yeah, or to go to drink and then
yeah,
forget about it.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm going to do a little later today. So yeah,
with ACR.
With ACR. So yeah, actually, what's the drinking like out there in the Netherlands? Because I could never. Every time I'm in the US, I can't find brandy, or I struggle to find brandy.
Yeah, it's also not really super big here. Look, I mean, I pay €6.50 for a pint of beer, so I drink mostly at home or with friends.
Holy crap! How much is €6.50?
It's about 105 rand, 110 rand.
Holy crap!
Yeah, I mean it's not like a Heineken. That would be a Polana, but I mean it's imported from Germany, which is 2-hour drive away, so it shouldn't be that expensive. But anyway, yeah, so drinking here is expensive, but what's big here at the moment is gin, like craft gins and all.
Oh, yeah, that's become big here as well.
Yeah, so I'm into the G's and T's, but I mean I stick with beer most of the time. And some Greek guys that I've met over here have got me into drinking something called mastika, which is like, I don't know, it's such a weird taste. It's got a very unique flavor, but it's a herb that grows only on certain Greek islands. And they use this into a liqueur, and you drink that, and it's amazing. But so unique. Anyway, I like a few of those, so shout out to the Greeks for giving us some great stuff.
Yeah, along with all the other technologies and all that jazz, thanks to the Greeks. I tried a Blutlemoen gin and tonic, and it was amazing. It's funny you mentioned the gin and tonic craze, because there's still like a sort of old boys vanguard here who are like, oh man, drinking gin and tonic is so gay, so girly and gay. I'm like, okay, bro, I'm enjoying myself here. Like you stick to whatever you want to stick to.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, when I started drinking as a kid, I used to drink Captain Morgan and Coke. That was my poison.
Oh, I was Captain Morgan and Spice Gold and Sprite.
Oh, yeah. So you see,
yeah.
I mean, it changes. Your tastes change as you go along. Now, I actually don't like Coca-Cola as much as I used to when I was a kid. So I maybe drink like a glass of Coke a year.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. If the old boys, maybe they had their gin and tonic days, they could expand. But I'm trying to develop a taste for wine, especially since I might be moving to Portugal soon. So I'm drinking more wine, and I've been trying this other Spanish thing called vermouth that a Spanish guy gave to me. Yeah,
I know
like
vermouth, yes.
Wine. It's so good. So yeah, I like the options. I don't diss anyone in terms of their drinks.
I too. I think there's a certain elitism, especially in whiskey drinkers. There's a certain elitism, like Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey. I prefer Scotch. When I'm not drinking Fireball, I prefer Scotch. But I also subscribe to the theorem that the best whiskey is the one you like the most, how you like it. There's a certain, I'm just over that elitism anymore. And it's funny, I was just thinking about it when I started drinking. It's I think it's a uniquely not uniquely, but a very typical South African thing. When you think of when did you actually start drinking? Like you snuck out and went to like some abandoned shed or some shit with like some beers with your boys, and technically you shouldn't have been, but God, there's something so endearing about that memory of like you snuck out a beer with your boys and it was just amazing. It's just. Yeah.
Yeah, my memory of that is we used to steal at my one cousin's house. We would take tequila. So like the parents would be having a party. We'd steal the bottle of tequila. We'd take it to my cousin's room. We'd hide under the bed. Tequila under the bed with salt and lemon. And we were like 13 or 14. But look, I don't encourage underage drinking.
No.
And funny enough, like, so I kind of, for what it's worth, I made my name online in the fight for decriminalizing cannabis. So that was sort of where I got my followers at first, and that's sort of how I started in the online or the alternative media space, was because I was pushing the decriminalization of cannabis. I don't like to be flippant about using substances, especially not alcohol, because I've had
Sorry? There you go. Yeah.
And
losing you for a second there.
And I underestimated for a very long time the link between drinking and my mental health.
Right.
And understandably, I was grieving. Understandably, I was depressed. But I drank, which made me feel better. But it got to a point where I was a mess. And I think I missed alcoholism like very mildly. Like I missed it by the skin of my teeth. And then one day, I didn't used to smoke weed. Like I tried weed twice in high school, and it just made me paranoid. But one day I smoked a joint with a close friend of mine. And I had this sort of, I don't know, man, it came from somewhere else. It was a sort of a mild psychedelic experience looking back. And it was like, hey, Quinton, you need to watch your consumption of alcohol because it's going to fucking kill you. And I quit drinking cold turkey for the next 2.5 years. So in my early 20s, I didn't drink at all. And so yeah, I guess a cautionary tale. As much as I like to drink now, I can now drink healthy. I can drink without going to excess every time. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. And I guess this is just the psychologist in me coming out. But like, I like to drink, and I think people can drink to have fun, and I think it can be a source of pleasure in your life. But again, back to the fine line sort of situation, you have to know where that line is, because drink is something that sneaks up on you quite instinctively.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why I felt like the need to preach that, but you know.
No, it's because it actually links into somebody on Twitter. I think it was at Gentina. Anyway, she shared a story of some dude.
I know Gentina, 3D artist.
Yeah. She shared the story of her brother who works as a software engineer, and some dude in his office. Yeah, drank heavily. For those of you who don't know, he drank heavily. Not the brother, some dude who works with her brother. And he died from, I think it was a ruptured something or other, but it was drinking induced. And what you told me with the whole drinking thing, I know from experience that a lot of my buddies engineered, mostly in the STEM community. I obviously can't speak for every faculty, but in varsity and even now in corporate when working, I know in the STEM community, myself and a lot of mates, there is a very hard drinking mentality. A lot of software engineers drink a lot, and I think that a lot of them are actually at what you would call problem points. And I think that there's a hard drinking culture in our community, as it were, as you call it, the STEM, the engineers and the computer scientists, because of partially, and this is just me sort of speculating, partially who we are and partially what we do. I say partially who we are because the general mental makeup of somebody who's, let's say, does computer science or engineering, chemical engineering, whatever, your mind, it sounds like it's, and I mentioned this on Twitter as well, it's sort of like a Le Mans 24-hour race car. It's just going all the time. I know, I've experienced it with my own brain. It's going all the time. So from my experience and a lot of mates in sort of similar sort of faculties and all that, partially we drink because it helps quiet it down. It helps bring down the anxiety, the overthinking. It quiets down the Lamar's car. That's the half. That's the first half. Yeah. The second half is what we do, and I can speak from experience. And I'm not, and I know, you need to go through hardship. I'm not saying life in varsity should be easy, but I think that is, and this is just me again speculating, it's worth taking a look at a lot of these degrees in things like chemical engineering, computer science, whatever, mechanics, medicine, also, whatever. It's worth taking a look at these degrees in terms of the environment they create, because the pressure that it creates, especially at higher league schools, and especially in postgrad, in masters, not so much honors and undergrad, but especially in masters and PhD program, the pressure it creates in these sort of things. It's sort of like the Marines. They break you down to build you back up. Except these programs just break you down. They don't build you back up. That's all on you. And I know not close friends, but sort of compatriots one or two who did, in towards the end of our undergrad years and our honors year, hang themselves. And I know of stories. Every programmer, every mechanical engineer knows stories of people who just couldn't take it and break. Because I know, yes, heat and pressure makes diamonds, but even diamonds break under enough pressure. And I think, as I said, it's worth looking at the pressure in these degrees, because the things it's doing to these kids, and it's not the losers, as it were, or the dregs, but it's some of the best students that just break and they hang themselves or jump off a building or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if you could maybe dissect that a bit more for me, but yeah, that's my theorem on it.
I think I agree with you 100%. I just want to add one other aspect, which I think is quite interesting. So, not to generalize, but for the most part, the people that I know that are very tech-oriented, actually quite introverted people.
Yeah.
And the thing about alcohol is that, like, when you start drinking, up until maybe a few drinks, 5, 6 drinks, it disinhibits you. So you're actually a little bit more social. You're feeling like you can say what you want, and I never underestimate when I look at people using drugs, and I'm super open-minded when it comes to this. But I always like to look at what does the drug do for you, not what does it do to you, because that's a quality of the substance itself on the nervous system. What does it do for the individual when it comes into contact with their personality? And for a lot of introverted people, alcohol is actually a way that they feel a little bit more loose around people. It helps to get past some of the social anxiety and stuff like that. So if that's also the case, you then get into another feedback loop where, let's say you're going out and maybe you go on a date and you're socially anxious, but you're there with this person and you start knocking them back, because it helps you to feel like you're coping in that situation. That's also a quick way to spiral out, because then you start to rely on the booze to be your personality in a way. That it's just something that I've picked up on. But I agree with you in terms of the way that it quiets one's mind. It basically knocks the mind out, pretty much. And which is great sometimes, but it's not a sustainable way of dealing with your stress or trying to find your way in the world. Like I really do feel like drug use has a time and a place.
Oh yeah.
And some drugs are for fun, others are for medicine, in my opinion. And you need to find the line. But what you also need is good people around you. Who you can trust. I mean, like, when I was drinking heavily, as I said earlier, as a kid, I had a close friend, I won't mention his name, but he was the same. And he was a super nice guy, just a wonderful dude, but depressed. And he and our personalities fed off each other, and the drinking environment that we had between each other in our friendship became something quite toxic. I didn't have someone to tell me, hey, you know, look at this. I just sort of realized it at that same time when I smoked weed the one day. And yeah, like, I also think people should just be cautious of the environment they create with people and the drug use.
Yeah,
because really things spiral out pretty quickly.
No, it's true. I mean, it's as my mom would say, be careful who you get blackout drunk around, and I'm sure a lot of girls' parents have said that as well. It's like, careful who you, especially girls. I mean, dudes like Varsity, Dayhouse, Rez, all that. Yeah, we. I mean, let's be honest. There's. I think all of us know of somebody or have heard a story of somebody who got blackout drunk or whatever every now and then. And there was the occasional prank, like you drew a dick on his face or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. I think we're talking about the really dangerous consequences of losing yourself around the wrong people.
Yeah, or just allowing yourself to open the door where that becomes a possibility.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
and that's where it becomes a slippery slope. But shit, that was a bit heavy. I wasn't expecting that.
No, it's the No Script Show. We're all whatever here, as you know. So yeah, but I mean, it's
you guys great.
Thanks. We try our best. I mean, look, just to cap that off, it's on a lighter note. At least, you know, if you do have the right people around you, like. Let me put it to you this way. I don't think I can, I obviously I don't know everything for certainty, but I don't think there's a female associate or friend that I have that would ever worry that if she came over to my place and got blackout drunk, you know, she'd wake up to a nasty surprise, you know. I don't think
on the face, but that's not so bad.
Yeah, that's not so bad. Although I have had people come over to my house or guys and girls come over to my house or drink with me or be in my car, and there have been some nasty surprises in terms of like people puking on my car or something like that. I'm just like, you know, like, but it's a weird situation because in that moment you're so pissed. You're like, oh God, I want to hit you so bad. But you know what? The hangover you're going to have tomorrow is punishment enough. So I'm just like, fine. But deep down, a little bit of me is like, God, I want to hit you so badly right now. Just beat your face in for this. There's nothing more annoying than that. Like, oh, sorry?
Because they do shit that's why they get the dicks drawn on. Because they do shit that makes them deserve that.
Yeah. I know it's completely selfish, but it's just so annoying. Like, come over to my house, crash. Don't puke on my. And I sound like an old man now, but like, don't puke on my couch, man. Come on, let's be gentlemen about this. You know, like, come on.
You just reminded me. Did you ever see the Charlie Murphy skit?
Charlie Murphy.
Fuck.
Couch. I love that. Okay, for those of you who have never looked this up, you're gonna find an internet gem. Just go to YouTube right now. Pause the podcast. Have you paused it? Good. Okay, come back. Great. Now go to YouTube and find Charlie Murphy True Hollywood Stories, and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. It is hilarious. It's amazing. Yeah.
I can see someone being drunk, just puking and saying, "Fuck your couch, Wotan."
You know what? I would be so pissed at them, but deep down, a little bit of me would laugh. It's just a little bit of me, but the older, more adult me now. I'm now in terms of years old. I now have a bowl of fruit in my house, and I actually eat the fruit when I come home and go to work. That's how old I am now. Yes.
Real adult stuff, bro.
I bought a dining room set now. Like, I got a nice leather chair dining room set and nice oak and wood, black and wood contrast. And suddenly I get why my mom was so pissed when I left like like glasses and without coasters on the table, and suddenly I get why she was pissed now. I get it now. Well, like it only took a couple of decades, but I get it now.
Yeah, moms were right.
Yeah, I'll remind her of that tomorrow at family lunch, Sunday family lunch. But yeah, dude.
You place your glass on the coaster.
Sure, as I said, I'm not even kidding, dude. I actually have like the wood floor section of my house. The furniture, I have like furniture coasters underneath the chairs of the wood chairs, just so that it doesn't like scuff the floor in any way. That's how old I am now. So, you know, for all the Whiskey Wotan antics on Twitter, I actually have that responsible side to me.
I respect people who respect wood.
Bruh. I mean, come on. There's actually something pretty classy about like an oak, like an old wood floor or something like that. There's something classy about that.
Yeah.
Adds that little extra touch. Yeah.
Gotta respect wood.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I don't know. Wow, how long have we been going? This is actually one of the longer episodes. But to be fair, I did have to have you on the podcast because I'm just so glad you're back on Twitter. It's though we should probably look at closing this episode out. I'd like to have you on again. Hopefully, when my co-hosts are better. And if you want to jump in on that collab with me and the Man Patriot Boys and Conscious Caracal, we're forming something. Anything else you want to take? We'll probably chat after the podcast, but that's for the platinum tier members of the No Script Show. You guys can hear that chat, but for now, I think we're gonna start closing this one out. Anything on your mind, bruh?
On my mind, well, we had a lot today, and so yeah, thanks for everyone for listening, and also to my friends on Twitter who listened as well. Thanks so much for welcoming me back with open arms again. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed my last article about Helen and German, the Grand Ideological Inquisition.
Yeah, great article.
I also want you guys, thank you, man. I want everyone just also to really just think about these archetypes that politicians are using at the moment, because I think we need to find a way collectively to find a narrative to counter some of the archetypes of the eternal apartheid that are flying through the culture. But anyway, that's another conversation. It's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for my part, I will say thank you for coming on. And as usual, we have a Discord. If you fans want to chat to us, you can go to noscriptshow.com to check out the links to this podcast on your various apps that you enjoy consuming the podcast on. And we look forward to more appearances from my man Quentin. And stay safe out there. Enjoy your Saturday. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, which as always is not much. And thank you for listening. Cheers, guys.